Hello, everybody. Just give us all a moment to get started. You know, we're using Microsoft Teams. We're having some technical difficulties and getting our wonderful presenter on. Give us a few minutes, and he is trying to log on. I hope all of you are having a wonderful time this summer and classes are going well. And everybody's looking forward to having Juneteenth off to celebrate.
Jen, I just want to confirm, when I mute and share my screen, can y'all still hear the music playing and see the screen?
I can still hear the music.
Do you see the screen with his picture?
Yes.
Okay. Just to make sure.
If y'all want to know more about upcoming online events, so students can win money at our Independence Day bingo. It's coming up. The link in the chat will take you to all upcoming events.
Hello and good afternoon. Hi, Janet. You may be
Hello.
able to hear
I
me, but
keep going back to mute. I don't know what I keep hitting. But y'all, welcome. We got in here with technical difficulties. We are going to go ahead and get started. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Absolute Equality. My name is Jana Weiss, and I'm the Online Student Life Coordinator. Today with us is Reginald C. Adams. He's really known for creating award-winning mural sculptures and installations in historic and underserved communities across the U.S. And you might have seen his work in Galveston. His art, Absolute Equality, Juneteenth Mural. Mural. I have a hard time with that. Apparently, mural. Uh, um, and creating Juneteenth murals around the country. And our host today is Dr. Sade Campbell, Manager of Enrollment Communications and Social Media. I want to say welcome to both of you. We're excited to have you here with us today. And I'm going to be working the chat for them. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And I'm going to give this over to Dr. Campbell.
All righty then. Maybe I think one day when I get big, I will be a doctor, but not quite yet. she gave me a promotion. Hey, look, we have to make sure in these things. We have to make sure in these things in these educational spaces and streets and whatnot. So I will take it.
atmosphere.
Take it. You deserve it.
You know. But so happy to have you all here today to commemorate Juneteenth, and so happy to have Reginald C. Adams, a really at this point world-renowned muralist. I first met Reginald when I was interviewing him on HCC TV's Up to the Minute. Jana was another guest that day, and that is how we all got connected. And Jana immediately sent me a message and was like, "We have to get him on to talk with our online college students for Juneteenth." And so we're so happy because this is an incredibly busy time of year for Reginald, as you all will soon find out why. But I want to kick things off with properly introducing our guest today. Reginald C. Adams is an award-winning and world-renowned Houston-based artist who has been instrumental in commemorating Juneteenth with the Absolute Equality Juneteenth Mural Project, which has been touring cities across America. It has been installed in 13 cities across the country. If anyone is familiar with art and doing art as a job, as a passion, you would know how incredible that is to do what he's been able to do, especially for something as important as Juneteenth. So beginning in 2021 in Galveston, Texas, that first Absolute Equality Mural Project by Adams inspired a nationwide endeavor. The national initiative features large-scale murals in Houston, Dallas, Shreveport, Louisiana, Miami, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia that celebrate a history and heritage of Juneteenth, the day when enslaved people in Texas were finally informed of their freedom. 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 was signed. Adams and his team have collaborated with community members to create the murals, which highlight prominent Black historical figures, symbols of African American culture, and the struggles and triumphs of the Black community. Through his powerful creative vision, Adams has been spreading awareness and appreciation of Black history and culture, what role this has played in American history, and inspiring greater unity and absolute equality for all. So get some digital energy in your hands, some little emojis in the chat, presenting to some, introducing to others. Mr. Reginald C. Adams. So happy to have you today, Reginald.
Thank you so much, Sade, for that warm introduction. And thank you, Jana, for setting up. Really excited to be here and share our story with your students. So glad to be here.
Yes, and I think to get everyone in a better understanding is you understand it when you hear it, but I think to show a short clip of what you've been doing with the murals. I think we're going to kick things off like that, and then we're going to have a conversation, a chat, and a Q&A. It's going to be something that we really hope you all walk away with, knowing more about Juneteenth and the intersection of how we are how it is being commemorated through the arts.
The mission of Absolute Equality Juneteenth Mural Project really is to reimagine the role that public art plays in telling the heritage of American history. I'm Reginald Charles Adams, and today we're painting a mural celebrating Juneteenth with some Capital One ambassadors. The idea of absolute equality was derived from the mural that we painted in Galveston, Texas, which is the birthplace of Juneteenth. The actual word was pulled from a series of general orders, which were declarations that were announced in 1865. And in 2021, we were successful in painting a mural to help tell that story. And that concept has now birthed other murals around the country where different artists are telling the story of the fight for freedom through a local perspective with local communities. Houston is one of 6 cities, including Dallas, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Miami, where we'll see these absolute equality Juneteenth murals manifest, and hopefully more cities to come in the future.
To me, art is the best way to instantly affect the emotions of the community. Vibrant artwork with an incredible narrative touches the community and just let people know that there's beauty in the world. So art is extremely impactful, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Volunteering for a project like this, it means that we can just be a part of something great. One thing about Juneteenth is everybody doesn't know why we're celebrating it. This mural shows exactly why we're celebrating it. It tells a story. It makes me feel like I belong and that I'm supposed to be here.
You know, this area has a lot of history. It's the most populated Black-owned businesses in the country. With Juneteenth becoming a holiday, and overall, I wanted to make something that everyone could relate to, and I think I did that.
I was in the original mural back in 2021 in Galveston. Capital One realized the impact and how it can really make a difference through art, and so I think that's why Capital One decided to be involved.
Partners like Capital One are really important. I couldn't be in 6 cities bringing this story to life without the support of a partner that's not only vested, but also willing to bring their people to the table. The inspiration behind the Absolute Equality Juneteenth mural is really freedom. The idea of what happens when you have freedom to choose. What kind of environment do you want to create for yourself? And that's what this mural and the message really is for me.
All right. Let me see if I can get back to what I was sharing and get this screen back up. All right. So, hope you learned a little bit more about what Reginald and his team they have been doing with the murals across the country. I think it would be really important for us to kick things off with, I guess, a discussion starter. What does freedom mean to you? And as you all listen, because I know his answer is going to be incredibly thought-provoking, I also want y'all to drop in the chat what freedom means to you all. But first question, opening up with you, Rachel, what does freedom mean to you?
That's powerful, you know, because we talk about freedom, especially being in America, and the freedoms that we have. We look at sometimes at other countries and cultures and hear about, you know, certain people can't speak out, or you can't talk about a religion, or you know, you can't wear certain clothing. So, you know, I think Americans, we take for granted certain freedoms. But what does freedom mean to me is really the lifestyle that I get to live. All my life, I've longed to be an artist. And for the last 30 plus years here in Houston, I've been able to live out that dream. And that dream has given me the freedom to travel around the world, creating murals and other art projects, mainly with young people, because that's very close to my heart, but really in communities that are oftentimes overlooked. And so the work in Galveston is really a continuation of me exercising that freedom, the freedom to live off my creativity. And so I don't take it lightly that I get to wake up pretty much every day and decide on what I get to do with my time and where I get to spend that time. And I'm very intentional around what I do at that time and ensuring that I don't misuse this freedom, that I get to basically live out the dream of being an artist, being a creative, and contributing to our society. So, freedom to me is really just that, following that instinct or that inspiration to do what I feel I've been put on this earth to do.
I love that. And one, freedom means a lot of different things in a cultural context that we are in now than it did on June 19th, 1865. And for those who don't know, that's where the word Juneteenth is derived from. It is a combination of June and 19th, and it is the day where General Order 3 was announced in Galveston by General Granger that declared 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves, that the enslaved people in Texas were free, marking what many declare as the official end of slavery. It's also known as Juneteenth Independence Day, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Liberation Day, Emancipation Day, all of those things. And in 1980 in Texas, Representative Al Edwards, who was from Houston, made it a state holiday. Texas was the first state to make Juneteenth a holiday. And in 2021, it became a federal holiday. It is the first federal holiday to be enacted since Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So there are not a lot of federal holidays that we have experienced probably being implemented in our lifetime. So this is really special and a reminder for America to pause and sit with what progress have we made around freedom, and where do we really need to continue to do that work. Um, there have been so many experiences, and you and I have talked so much through different projects, Reginald, that have really led to you doing the work around creating like what you like to call a visual narrative to tell the truth about history. What are some of the experiences you feel have led you to your work, to the work you're doing with the Juneteenth mural installations across the country?
So early in my career, in fact, I think one of the very first major public art commissions that I was awarded was honoring late state Congressman Mickey Leland, who was a political figure from the Houston area, that was killed in a really tragic accident in 1980, I believe. But uh, at that time, County Commissioner Franco Lee wanted to do something to honor his friend and colleague, Mickey Leland. And as a result of that desire to honor this man's legacy, he was a humanitarian. He was very big on fighting hunger and hunger relief. We created a park, a memorial park, and in fact, it still stands as the Mickey Leland Memorial Park in Houston's Cashmere Gardens. And I would say, Sade, that was my first deep dive into seeing the power of being able to raise and lift the voices of unsung heroes through art. Because of the nature of the project, a lot of attention was garnered onto the final work, and it was a lot of people that came out to celebrate it. And it was one of those moments where I realized, okay, this is part of your assignment. Even though it's very early in my career, I was in my mid 20s when this all happened. I'm 52 now, so it's over 25 years ago. I realized that, as an artist, part of my work as a creative will be to elevate the stories of people and places that are oftentimes under spoken about in our historical social context. And 30 years later, I have many, many projects, countless projects where that has happened. And so when we received the call in the fall of 2020 to discuss the mural in Galveston, it really was a natural next step for me. We had just completed the uh, Emancipation Park mosaic murals. There are 4 sculptures that rest on the corner of Emancipation Park that honor the 4 founders. And Emancipation Park was really was birthed out of Juneteenth. You have four men in their community raise $800 to buy 10 acres of land so they could celebrate Juneteenth. This was, 160 years ago. And I just finished that project when I get this call to paint this mural in Galveston. And so it really was, I feel like, the next right thing to do. And now I know I'm just committed to continuing highlighting the people, places, and events that really describe our path to freedom in America. And so this work is not new. While it's maybe new to people, I'm not new to this type of work of using public art to tell these types of stories.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and definitely want to lean into the birthplace of Juneteenth is inarguably Galveston, Texas, right?
No.
That's right. So I mean, it was a port city. When you go to Galveston, these are things you don't think about when you see the beach. This is where enslaved people were traded as cargo. It is now a destination site, but there are so many markers in the birthplace of Juneteenth to remind you really where all of this history really a lot of this history existed in a lot of these port cities. Those ports played a huge role in the transatlantic slave trade, but also looking at its cousin down the street, Houston, has a lot of history around Juneteenth, deeply connected to what you mentioned, those four gentlemen, one of which is John Jack Yates. Some of you all may be familiar with that name because of the high school that is named after him, John Jack Yates. John Jack Yates is an incredible historical figure that really was so integral in starting what is now called Freedman's Town, which was a safe place and a haven for freed formerly enslaved people in Houston that were looking for a fresh start. He started and was integral in having churches and schools and the first park in the state of Texas, which is Emancipation Park, which him and three other gentlemen purchased so that African Americans had a safe place to celebrate their Jubilee. So some of the earliest official Juneteenth celebrations existed a mile up the street from HCC's Central Campus. If you look at where Emancipation Park is now. So definitely wanted to make that connection. In those four sculptures that you have on the corner of each corner of the park are those four gentlemen that paid that $800, which was a lot of money back then to purchase some land. And when you consider those who were formerly enslaved to put together. Oh, I mean, I thought you were going to chime in. It wasn't a...
Oh, I mean,
yeah. You were like, yes. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, to be able to work on that, I mean, that's the thread that is so important to me around being honored as an artist, to be able to say, I'm a part of that. Like, I didn't make the history. Those men were visionaries who acquired the land, which we still use to this day. There was a great, huge Juneteenth celebration this very weekend. So to have the forethought 150 years plus earlier to think that to this day, we're still using that park for the very purposes in which they acquired it for is really powerful. It's remarkable. And I'm honored as an artist to be able to honor them through my creativity. And so with that opportunity to honor them, I feel it's now part of my obligation to continue honoring those frontiersmen and women who are on the front lines of our freedom. And that's where this mural campaign really comes to light, is that this history is really important to Houston. It's really important to Galveston, but this was happening across the country, from coast to coast and literally sea to shining sea. We were fighting for our freedoms, and some of us were emancipated earlier in that timeline than others. But I'm using my artwork in collaboration with other artists and other creatives and community leaders to raise up these stories and do them in such a way where they can become outdoor classrooms or instruments for education, so that we can learn about those who came before us, who lived and died and fought for the freedoms that, quite frankly, we typically take advantage of, that we take for granted. And I'm committed to not take it for granted by doing this work and having an outlet like HCC to talk about it and share this work with your students is just a part of the continuum of the educational importance of why we're doing this work.
And I love what you're saying around outdoor classrooms, because when we think about what are teaching tools, when people are thinking about how can I commemorate Juneteenth as a holiday and not just quote unquote celebrate it, when I want to learn more, what do I have access to out of, outside of the internet, right? That maybe I can take my kids to, maybe I need to learn more. Houston is becoming a city, a destination city for people to move to. So there are a lot of people who didn't grow up in other parts of the country learning about Juneteenth as much as we did in Houston and in Galveston. So we need these tools, of course, across the country. So let's start with the Galveston mural that started all of this. And I think I remember it was you all installed it and had the the viewing of it 3 days before it became a federal holiday.
That's
or was
right.
it after?
I typically work with a team, and there were 6 of us on that team in 2021 that brought this mural to life. And if you have been to Galveston, you've been to the Strand, you almost cannot miss it. It's 5,000 square feet, essentially 44 feet tall by 125 feet long. It's right at the intersection of 22nd and Strand, or 22nd and Kempner, and literally in the heart of the downtown Galveston. And the mural is painted on the wall of Old Galveston Square, which was a mercantile building. It's still a commercial building with shops in the first floor and some of the first few floors. But 160 years ago, it was where cargo, lumber, cotton, wood, humans were being traded. And so I remember this moment, Sade, we were painting the mural, bringing this mural to life. 6 of us, 350 gallons of paint over 27 days, about 1,300 man hours. And we're on hydraulic lifts because we couldn't build scaffolding in the parking lot because because of the way the parking was set up, we had to use these hydraulic lifts. So if you can imagine, these 6 artists are basically painting this giant mural. And it was on a Saturday afternoon. We were about 90% done. So the mural, for the most part, was complete. We're working on the details. And a crowd had begun to build up below us of folks just, watching, the passerbyers, guests, visitors, some of the residents, just watching these artists basically create this visual art performance, bringing this mural to life. And I remember turning around, and there was this like overwhelming sense of, it was a mix of emotions. It was joy, it was pride, it was excitement, all balled up into one. But there was this awareness that 160 years prior, I would have been my ancestors' wildest imagination. Like, while they were being auctioned off along with animals, here I am 150 years later, through compensation, being paid to paint their story on the wall of the same building that they were being sold from. And, it just speaks to how far we can come and yet how far we have to go. Because are we in a perfect society? Absolutely not. Are we still unpacking the negative effects of chattel slavery and institutional racism? Absolutely. That's still happening. But yet we have come far enough to where one of the descendants of those enslaved Black Texans is now painting their story. And it was just another affirmation of my role. And now the responsibility that I have to my ancestors and to all of those who lived, died, and fought for these freedoms to tell their story in a very open way. And what makes the Galveston mural so beautiful and so powerful beyond its size, its scale, the color, the imagery, is it is literally at ground zero of this historical moment, because the parking lot that that mural overlooks was once the headquarters for the Union Army. So 150, 160 years ago, the Osterman building would have been standing in between us and that mural. And so we're talking about ground zero of Juneteenth. And I couldn't be, more honored to play a part in that happening. So to your comment, 3 days. So we finished the mural late, early May, mid-May, and we're planning for a grand dedication, Juneteenth. Galveston puts on a big celebration anyway for Juneteenth. That was already going to happen, but they got this big candle and a big cake now to celebrate with the completion of the mural. And lo and behold, 3 days prior to the dedication of the mural on June 19th of 2021, I believe it was June 16th, President Biden and VP Kamala Harris announced Juneteenth as a national holiday, and it just blew the entire project and everything around it up in a positive way, where national, international attention descended upon Galveston to learn about this new holiday. And there's this work of art that kind of served as the poster child for that moment. And I'm that guy, and I've just been pinching myself ever since, because it's truly a dream come true to have your work kind of used for such a historically significant milestone in American history. Yes, and so that parking lot where that red car, that car would have been inside of the Osterman building, and it was in Osterman building that the general orders, which essentially were the executive declaration to emancipate 250,000 enslaved blacks, were signed and presented, and now that mural faces that parking lot, and so yeah, it's an incredibly powerful moment in time, and I'm very honored to be a part of it.
I honestly, I've heard you tell this at least 3 times, and I'm still just like, whoo, every single time. To your point, so much of your lived experience you pour into it, and so much of what you take from the communities and where you are installing this public art. There's so much intentionality around it. Tell us a little bit about the artistic elements and choices that you made for the mural in Galveston.
So each mural, I think it's worth noting, Sade, that each mural is different in each city. We're in 13 cities from coast to coast, and I think it was important that we not try to cookie cut, paste, and cut every element of Galveston's significance into other cities, even though we're all the murals honor Juneteenth, this idea of freedom. So with the particular mural, there's 4 major vignettes, and then there's kind of like the supporting elements. And to the very far top, I'd say 5 in this mural, there's a map of the transatlantic slave trade, which largely in part is how many Black Americans arrived in the United States or in the Americas, primarily from West Africa, through the trade winds that run from West Africa to the Americas. Many of those millions of enslaved Africans arrived in South America, Brazil, the Caribbean, and in North America along the southern coast. And we wanted to acknowledge that through this map. You then, in the background, have the movement of human cargo, which was part of that moment of chattel slavery in America. We then have the first major vignette of this nobleman who was an enslaved navigator. His name was Estevanico the Moor, and he was from North Africa, but he was enslaved by the Portuguese government to lead an expedition to the Americas. And he was shipwrecked in Galveston Bay. So literally just blocks away from where this mural stands is the bay, is the pier where commerce would be coming in to unload and pick up commodities. And his expedition of ships were shipwrecked in that bay. So he gets recognized as the first North African to arrive in the Americas in 1528. And this story came to life through talking to some of the local historians, and we thought it was befitting to include him into that timeline. And then as we move further into the design, you have a reference to Harriet Tubman. We associate Harriet Tubman with the Underground Railroad. And while we've heard many stories about the Underground Railroad running from the south to the north, what many don't realize that it was far quicker and faster to get from, say, Texas or Louisiana to Mexico, where slavery had been abolished as early as the early 1800s. And so many escapee, refuge, and runaway enslaved Black Texans left for Mexico. And she was a part of that network, that pathway to freedom. So we wanted to acknowledge her and really pay homage to the women. I mean, it's hard in American history to find women that are highlighted for making significant contributions. So we didn't want this mural of a bunch of men, knowing that alongside every great man is a woman. And we wanted to pay homage to Harriet Tubman's contribution to that path towards freedom. And so above her in the background are Union soldiers fighting the Civil War, which they successfully won. And this was right in the midst of the Emancipation Proclamation being announced in 1862 by then President Abraham Lincoln, essentially abolishing slavery across the United States. But it was Texas, amongst a few other states, that were just rebel states, and they chose not to abide by the Emancipation Proclamation. These were Confederate states for the most part, and it took Major Granger coming from the port of New Orleans with thousands of Black Union soldiers to enforce the general orders, General Order number 3 in particular, that essentially emancipated the 250,000 enslaved Black Texans. And it wasn't just Granger making an announcement and all of a sudden Black Texans around the state are jumping for joy and barbecuing and eating watermelon and drinking red soda. It didn't happen instantaneously. Those thousands of Black Union soldiers basically were dispersed across the state, where they essentially rode by horseback and walked from town to town and plantation to plantation, notifying those human traffickers that they had to release that property, which were those Black Texans. And so it was the men with guns that we don't hear about, but we pay homage and tribute to by having them a part of that scene with Granger sitting, yes. And then as we move further into the design in the background, in this rendering, because the image that's on the screen is actually a digital rendering, there is a image of the San Luis Hotel, but now in that bottom background vignette, you have an image of late state representative Al Edwards, who was the first state legislator in Texas to have Juneteenth recognized as a state holiday. This took place in 1980. And if you were to go to Galveston now and look at the mural, you will see a portrait of State Representative Al Edwards alongside an architectural rendering of Reedy Chapel AME, which was the first organized Black church in Galveston after Juneteenth was announced. And so the mural's been updated, and you would see 2 new images in that vignette where St. Louis Hotel once stood, or the Galvez Hotel. And then the major vignette, kind of dominated in red, white, and blue, is a parade of individuals walking in pursuit of absolute equality. The new Juneteenth flag is rendered at the base of that design. And another update that was made to the mural after the mural was dedicated was the inclusion of the grandmother of Juneteenth, Miss Opal Lee, who, bless her heart, is now 97 years old. It was about a decade ago that she began walking across America to pay homage to the time that it took for the Emancipation Proclamation to reach the state of Texas. 2.5 years. So from city to city, she's walking 2.5 miles from her home in Fort Worth to Washington, D.C., collecting signatures to help Juneteenth become recognized as a national holiday. So we came back and painted her in color amongst these silhouetted parade marchers, paying homage to the role that she has played in that pursuit of absolute equality and freedom. And then in the very background, the last vignette, there's an astronaut overlooking a celestial, cosmic, terrestrial background landscape. And it was a creative inclusion that we decided to add. And it was really to pose a question is, will we take these same attitudes of race, nationality, to other planets as we look to colonize the moon, put a base on the moon and colonize Mars? And these are just, questions that we will answer as we move forward in time. But this is essentially the chronologue of maybe 500 years plus that we wanted to use as an instigator of questions for those who view the mural, and perhaps an inspiration of ideas for those who may know parts and pieces of this narrative.
What an incredible walkthrough. And I think that you mentioned it earlier, but I don't want it to be missed that absolute equality was in the General Order 3 that was announced and shared in Galveston, Texas to free the slaves, hence the name of the mural series that's installed across the country. Just wanted to make sure if people were joining early, have joined later, that they didn't miss that piece. So much history, and you telling this story, telling the story of Juneteenth through this mural. At first glance, you may not think it was so much in the visual of this, but it really does capture that freedom is not a final destination. That this is all the way to space and beyond. When we think about anything around acquisition, we have to remember our history, that we're not repeating it. And so such a beautiful representation of it. I want to wrap things out with asking you this, and because we want to leave time for questions and to wrap things out. Through your art, what message do you want to send about the importance of remembering Juneteenth?
That we still have work to do. That despite the freedoms that we have, having acknowledged a Black president in America, which many thought would never occur, having Juneteenth as a national holiday where we get to learn and celebrate, just depending upon how you choose to acknowledge the day. There's still work to do, because we know that we still live in a land of inequity and inequality, and how children are educated, and how financial resources are shared in our healthcare system. There's lots of disparities, leaving work to be done. So I believe we all have a part to play, Sade. I'm a visual artist, and I use my work as a form of activism. And so I'm doing my part. We can sit up easily and kind of complain about what's not right and what's going wrong, and all the woes of the world, and the way the system has managed African Americans, and all that's real and important, that we don't overlook it and brush it under the rug. But at the end of the day, what will we do about it? And what I choose to do is use my God-given talent as an artist, as a creative, to paint these stories of individuals, events, and moments in American history that were on the front line of the freedoms that I get to enjoy. So before we jump into the questions, I want to read aloud the general order, because a lot of times we hear about General Order number 3, but we don't really hear what it meant. And it's interesting because there's actually still underlying tone of captivity in the actual general order, but it was in General Order number 3 that the absolute equality term was pulled from. So I read verbatim. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. Here's the twist. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So even though it's, hey, you all are free, there's also, don't be idle. Don't just be standing around. And so there's this undercurrent of threat of get to work.
For the same people
So
you've been working for free for.
Stay present. Stay at your present home. Don't go running off. Stay at your present home. So we're still dealing with that because that was part of an executive order. And interestingly enough, it wasn't until February the 7th of 2013 that the state of Mississippi officially abolished slavery because the proper paperwork had never been filed until then. So we still have some work to do. And I'll continue doing that work through the act of bringing these murals across the country. But I'd love to hear from your audience, any questions or feedback. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to share our journey of absolute equality with your campus.
You know, who you made me want, you left me on a cliffhanger. You know, we could have leaned into that last one a lot. Well, I do I want you to start dropping your questions, but I want to wrap out that we have been privileged to not only have time with Reginald today, but also through collaboration with HGC TV, have our hour-long Juneteenth special that is launching tomorrow. And we went to Galveston. We talked to people who are historians. We looked at the structures and the murals and the places that that Reginald mentioned. And so I want to show y'all a little teaser for tomorrow, and I want you all to mark your calendars, okay? This is hot off of the YouTube presses. So let me make sure I'm sharing. And it's only a minute, and then we're going to get to questions. HGC TV Studios, because we have something incredibly special for you. We have an entire hour-long Juneteenth special. It's going to be called Juneteenth. HGC celebrates freedom through the art, and we are able to do that because we are here with one of Houston's renowned muralists, Mr. Reginald Adams.
So glad to be here with you, Sade, today, talk about Juneteenth.
Yeah, absolutely. I guarantee you're not going to want to miss this. Tune in so you can learn more about Juneteenth and the great work that he's doing with murals across the entire country.
Thank you.
How do we see that? Where do we go to watch it?
Oh, you mean a teaser? You want me to drop the link?
No, the actual program.
Oh, it's going to be on Houston Community College TV. That's the name of our YouTube channel, and it will be live on there. We also have a cable access channel, but the most accessible way to watch it will be on YouTube.
So Houston Community College TV.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop the I dropped the link for the teaser, and so subscribe to that channel so you don't miss out when it's posted. And I want to go to the chat if you have comments, if you have questions around Juneteenth, if you're an aspiring artist and you want to know more, have a question for Reginald. This is the perfect time to ask.
We have a thank you so much for your work, sir. You are extraordinarily gifted and a light to the world. We still have people typing.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you for that.
You know, and when you mentioned what does freedom mean to you, that one person said, I agree, and the ability to express that inspiration in a way that feels most authentic. Would love to see some of your artwork on a t-shirt that I could purchase.
That's possible. There's a shop on our Absolute Equality website. And if I can drop that into the chat, let me see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't
do
that. But,
I think one thing We Zoomed has, he has, through art, also through a children's book. I think he has a couple different ways to, outside of also visiting these public art installations to support the work.
That's right. And if you can't, there we go. There's a shop. We're adding content now, even from this year. But there you'll be able to find some the artwork and other graphics supporting our pursuit of absolute equality. And yes, are you working on a new art mural open to the public? Very soon, we're going to be starting a mural that we are designing for the city of Austin. That's in the works. We'll be producing the mosaic here in Houston, but it will be for a new bridge, underpass in Austin, and there's all. Yeah, we have lots of work. So if someone's to visit my website, reginaldadams.com, that's my personal site for my public art portfolio. And it's there where if you sign up as a subscriber, you would get an email notification or a newsletter when we have open to the studio workshops for the general public. Thank you for adding those web addresses.
Yes. Yeah, one thing we may not we didn't talk, we really did want to make sure that people walked away understanding his work in connection to elevating the story of Juneteenth for all generations. But he has a lot of art installed across the city, one of which, if you all have passed the Breakfast Club, I think it's is it like 4 walls, Reginald?
Yeah, well, there's 2 walls in particular. Actually, yeah, well, there's 2 walls. One on the Breakfast Club restaurant proper, and then one across the street in one of their buildings where we have a mural honoring President Obama and his wife, Michelle. And then on the Breakfast Club wall proper, we have a mural we call Black Mountain Rushmore, and it's a mural that honors Carter G. Woodson, Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Booker T. Washington. Yes.
We'll see the bubbles, the anticipation in the chat of people's questions. All right, wow. Let's engage in the chat. What's one thing you learned about Juneteenth that you didn't know coming into the presentation today? Let's drop that in the chat if you don't have a question.
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old who's been very patient with me, so I apologize if you hear his feet in the background, but I'm letting him know we're almost done.
That's not why we're laughing.
We're laughing at the chat.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
We have
right,
several
let me show
people.
y'all one thing you all are going to walk away with that you know about Juneteenth that you didn't go in knowing today. That'll do our educator heart good if we know that you all are walking away knowing one more thing than you did before. What's the takeaway that you all have? Start playing Jeopardy music. I'm waiting on you all to answer. All right, I think we got about 2 more minutes. If you're getting your question in.
As they're typing in, I'm always so overwhelmed by it. It took them 2.5 years to learn officially that it had been abolished. with the Union soldiers right there, everybody kind of had heard it and stuff, but nobody was going to do anything until somebody came in and made the official announcement. Can you imagine waiting that long in this day and time to hear about something so important? That's always just amazes
Well,
me.
let me share, Jana. It's an interesting comment you made, because these are the things I've learned along the way. So it wasn't that they didn't know, because this is fact. There were 123 newspapers across Texas that had published the Emancipation Proclamation. And in fact, on the front cover of what was Houston's newspaper back then, they had published the entire Emancipation Proclamation. And so, mind you, of course, it wasn't very likely that an enslaved Black person could read, but there were some that could. And surely the word had spread. So, I want to dispel the myth that it took 2.5 years for these Texans to find out, because as I've traveled the country, that's a point of ridicule. People are like, oh, they're celebrating hearing about being free 2.5 years late. Like, you shouldn't be celebrating, you should be protesting. But it wasn't that you just don't, well, you can run away, right? At the risk of being killed, at the risk of being, shot in cold blood or tracked down by animals. But there's a lot of myths around the hearing of and the notification of when this happened. And so part of my work has been really to help unravel some of those myths. So for example, on the front page, the fourth column, in October 17th of 1862, the edition of the Houston's newspaper called the Tri-Weekly Telegraph, the entire Emancipation Proclamation was published. And so the word was out. It's just, it took the men with guns to finally enforce the emancipation of over 250,000 Black Texans back in 1865 in Texas.
I just, that it's just hard to conceive that they had to actually forcefully go in there and force them, even though they had read it in the newspapers and things, to having to make them,
That's right.
concede to this. It's just.
And referencing one of the questions, someone said that, however, the fact that Mexico was a safe haven, some of the oldest continuously celebrated Juneteenth celebrations are in Mexico. And they were from, and to this day, there's large celebrations of Juneteenth in Mexico because of that, because of the Underground Railroad that ran to the South. And we just don't hear about these things in traditional, formal Texas and American history. But these are some of the gems that I have picked up along the way. Just given me a much deeper respect and appreciation for what does Juneteenth really mean.
Let's look over and see what people had to say. I didn't realize Juneteenth was about abolition implementation in Galveston. Work is not finished. Oh, the written stating you're free, but stay where you are. Oh, there's the one that you're referencing. Mexico was a safe haven. For escaped enslaved individuals was information. These are great takeaways.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I've certainly enjoyed and appreciated the opportunity, Sharday and Jana, to share not only our work and the artwork, but also some of the backstory, because I think it helps us appreciate why we're celebrating. I think it's easy in America to just kind of get lost in another day off from work, or lost in the fireworks and the celebratory aspect. but not fully understand what are we celebrating. And I hope that we don't lose sight that we're celebrating freedom for everyone. It was a moment, an era of time in American history where all Americans were free. And because of that, it's a moment for all of us to celebrate that freedom. This is not just about Black people celebrating. It's about all of us recognizing that path towards freedom and the pursuit of absolute equality. And so thank you all once again for giving me the time and the space to share my learnings and my creativity with your students and with your audience. And for that, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all be sure to tune in on HTC TV, the YouTube channel, and check out the hour-long special with Reginald. So much more in there, so many more gems and learning for even more historians and more Juneteenth historians. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Happy Juneteenth, folks.
Happy
Bye.
Juneteenth.
Cheers.